idea or the concept of the chosen people. And the question for today is, are we the chosen people?
I already answered that. No, yes,
He
absolutely.
said yes, right? And I said we are, absolutely. So this concept or this idea of Am Segula, or the chosen people, has been a source of a lot of controversy through Jewish history. And I think that it has been for our best interest and also a source of persecutions for the Jewish people, right? Many other religions who, have seen us as, or when we say, you know what, we are the chosen people, we are the best people. God chose us, not you. Therefore, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to throw you away from my town, from my city, from my shtel, or the place where I'm living, right? And on the other hand, it has been a source of pride for the Jewish people. If we are chosen by God, it is because we have a particular mission to fulfill here in this world. Okay? So I would like to analyze, and this is a very interesting chapter that is in the book, and I would like to read parts from the chapter because it's very well written. And the way Rabbi Telushkin divided this chapter is first an introduction about the topic, and then he brings something interesting. He brings a historical perspective of Jewish choseness, and then Jewish opposition to this idea, meaning even within the Jewish world and modern Jewish thinkers, there is opposition to this idea that we are the chosen people. And if you would go to a Reform synagogue or a Reconstructionist synagogue, you would find that their Siddur has slightly differences with our Siddur because they have taken out these ideas of being the chosen people. Okay, so when is this something that you talk about with other people? Is this something that you discuss with probably your non-Jewish friends or relatives? Someone who has asked you, you the Jews, you think you are the chosen people, bad, or you think that is this something that you have discussed in the past with somebody else?
No.
Or no?
Never.
Never?
With other Jews more than.
Yes.
With other Jews.
Yes.
Okay, and what's the discussion about? What have you discussed?
Well, I like to quote one of my favorite Jews who considers himself barely Jewish, but my friend Howard, who finds it a very offensive. We had this conversation once
Right.
around a brunch table. He finds it really offensive, and and it was more a discussion about what's a better way to think about it than, oh, we're special. No, it's really not that we're special.
Mm-hmm.
It's that and his opposition to it was, why would a God choose anybody? What sense does that make?
Right.
And I think that's a better argument than just dismissing the notion of I think it's a good question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a God designate anybody?
Good.
So it was a good conversation, I thought.
Okay, good.
But what are we chosen for? Chosen for.
So, to be a light
Right,
unto the
let's-
nations.
We have responsibility.
That's exactly right. That's
So-
exactly right.
When in my camping experience, for my first 10 years of life, I've got a point here. I went to YMCA camps.
Were you like a feral wolf?
Wait a second. So I went to YMCA camps, and at YMCA camps, you learn how to build fires and tie knots and sail and whatever. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So then years later, you Chinchcook and stuff like that. And so years later, I apply for the Mador program at Ramah.
Mm-hmm.
And all the kids, the Mador program was a 3-year program where you eventually became a counselor. And a bunch of the kids who got accepted in the Mador program all went to Hebrew day schools and this and that and the other. And I went to YMCA camps. And they went to Ramah.
Right.
And I went to YMCA camps, right? And that's when I learned a phrase, Ata Yihia Ha'achra'i. And every time we went on a trip, and I was the leader of everything. I taught
Meaning
everybody how
you
to
will
horse.
be responsible, or you will be
You will
the responsible.
And I taught him how to put up tents, and I taught him how to build fires, and we were digging pits in the middle of the
Okay.
thing for cholent and stuff like that. And so my point is, maybe the reason why we're the chosen people is we're the only people who probably put up with this stuff.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good.
Wait a minute.
It's
I don't get that.
Biblical stuff. God chose us because who else would do this stuff?
Okay.
Not carry on.
So I think that this idea
keep
of
kosher food.
the chosen people is related to the idea of or lagoim. Or means light, and goim means nations, right? So to be a light unto the nations. And as you said, to show the way, which is hard, right? Which is complicated. And actually, we are reading from the Torah about Noah and Abraham. This is what we have been reading for these past weeks. And there are these two verses that are very different between the relationship of Noah and God and Abraham and God. So the verse with Noah says, Noah was a righteous person. Et ha-Elohim hitalech Noach. With God, or Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. And about Abraham, it says, Hitalech lefanai veheye tzamim, meaning walk in front of me and be righteous or be a good person. So the question that we always ask is, what is harder? Is it harder to walk together with God, or is it harder to walk in front of God or ahead of, or ahead? In this case, in front, ahead of God.
Where is the head?
Hitalech lefanai.
לפניי.
לפניי.
זאת אחריי.
No. Hitalech lefanai.
Okay. Well, that's on the kibbutz you learned that.
So ahead of
in the
God.
military. That's what.
Yes.
officers
Well,
do.
it's true. Right.
The leader go first, so it sounds to me like Noah
Interesting.
walk first and God behind him. It doesn't make sense.
So we always say that Abraham's task was much harder because it is much harder to lead than to walk with someone next to you or to walk with God next to you, right? Because if you walk with someone who's next to you, you both will figure out the best way to go. But if you are leading, you have to lead, and you have to figure out what is the best way to go or the best way to make it happen, right? So the same with Abraham, the same with us. If we are a light to, or ought to be a light to the nations, so it's much harder to lead the way. And I think that today it's much more relevant than what it was, or probably it was also relevant in the past. But today, in the light of what's going on with our society, it makes a renewed relevance where our society is going, and the ethical and moral nature of our society, and how we, the Jewish people, are trying to cope with this and make a change in our society, right? So, and I talked about it from the past Shabbatot from the Bima, but topics such as immigration, right? And you are probably following this caravan that is coming from Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico, and now it's going to come to the border. Right, so what are we going to do, or how are we going to face this? It's not another topic. It is related to this, because how are we, the Jewish community, going to respond to it? Are we going to say, send them all back, don't care about them, or try to find a way how to welcome them or receive them, or at least see what their demands are and what they are looking for, right? And Or take, for example, the topic of LGBTQ, the LGBTQ community. I just read about these laws that the president wants to change. I mean, it's
so unique. Well, I have a question, a basic question. How can you walk with God if God doesn't have a form?
True.
How do you walk with God? How do you be in front of God?
So let me push your question a little further. And if you want to walk with God, and God is a fire that will consume you or burn you, how can you walk with God? So the Talmud says it is not that you have to walk with God, you have to imitate God. And that's what we call the imitation of God.
But
Meaning,
isn't that
as
leadership?
God interacted or as God was concerned with this world in different ways, we should be concerned or interact with the world in a just and nice way as God did.
If you think of God as being infallible, wouldn't you expect him to be the leader and walk first?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And if God is everywhere,
But
is
he can't
without
walk.
form.
Right.
There's no form.
There's no form. So it's about the attributes of God.
Yeah, right.
It's about how God interacts with the world, with mercy and compassion and a just God.
But can I
Right?
go back to my friend Howard's
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Because I like the question. Why would one people have to be designated as, quote, chosen by the divine to do this?
Because that's how religions operate.
Wait a minute.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Whoa.
I mean,
And if you think about religions, that's the way it works. So we feel we are the chosen people because the prophets, and we will read some sources today where God, through the prophets, say to the Jewish people, you know what, you are the chosen ones, and I want you to be my people. But then comes this new covenant, this new breath, this new testament, this new covenant, right? So the Christians believe that they are the chosen and that the old pact that was established between God and the Jewish people is over. That's it.
Right.
Finito.
The
Doesn't
Muslims
exist
feel
anymore.
the same.
Right? So
Right.
I'm going to get there. So they say, you know what? There is a new pact through Christ and the death of Christ, and God is making this pact, this covenant with us. We are the chosen people, Christians.
okay.
And then the Muslims come and they say, no, what are you talking about? Muhammad and Allah chose him. We are the chosen people, right? So that's how religions operate.
But my question is, to go back to Howard, is would it not have been better for the creator to put out a message that all these different people are going to be responsible for?
Don't sit too close to
Wait a
it.
minute, wait a minute.
No,
That
okay.
all these
Just
different
giving you due
cultures and religions can offer truth.
Yeah.
And as opposed to pitting us against one another
Right.
with the concept
Mhm.
of chosenness, encourage the sharing of leadership and
Yep.
positive
And that's
things.
why Jewish leaders such as Mordechai Kaplan and others said, you know what, we don't believe anymore in this concept of the chosen people because we were all chosen, regardless of your faith, regardless of your way to practice religion. We were all chosen by God. And that's the way I like to explain it to my high school students. Actually, I had a very interesting conversation with my Merkaz students a couple of weeks ago. And I was talking to them about how can we make sense of different religions and different ways to practice our religion. And I told them, and this is how I explain it to the high school kids and teenagers, that I think that religions are like board games. So and they will understand. So for example, you have chess, you have checkers, you have backgammon, you have Metropoly, right? You name it, your favorite game. And each one of these games has its own set of rules, right? So you have rules for checkers, you have rules for chess, you have rules for Monopoly. Now, if you would like to play one board game with the rules of the other game, it will not work. And the same with religion. Each religion has its own sets of rules. And I think that the goal of religions, I hope, each religion is the same. In a board game would be to win the game. In a religion would be to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. So you have to follow the rules of your religion in order to achieve the goal of making this world a better world. Which game is truer than the other? None. They are different.
The game of life.
The game of and they are different. So which religion is truer than the other? None. There are different ways to play, right? Or to follow, the
To get to the same
to
goal.
get to the same goal.
How did the
But-
kids respond to that? I'm curious.
It makes sense to
That's
them.
good.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
But I have a question for you. We have it written in the Torah and Jews all along the history repeat it and
Mhm.
repeat it. Do the Christian or the Muslim have it in writing, and do they make a big
Sure.
issue out of it?
Yeah.
I don't know the quotes by heart, but I'm sure they do.
Because I think it was a misprinting.
Oh, misprinting.
Yeah, I think it's written
Yes, we're gonna get there.
but it should be אנחנו בחנוכה.
We chose you. Right. So the question that Yael is, or the idea that Yael is bringing is, this has been, discussed a lot in Jewish theology. Did God choose us, or did we choose God?
I think we chose him.
Her.
That's my feeling. That's what I'm
We chose God. We chose
Yes,
God,
yes.
and not necessarily God chose us.
right. Because God think like
Then we couldn't be the
ours.
chosen people.
What?
Then we wouldn't be the chosen people.
We're the
That's
Yeah,
chosen
well,
people.
We're the
So it
Jews.
should be
We're the
a
chosen.
Choosers.
The chooser people.
Could
The
be a
chooser
little
people.
bit less anti-Semitism.
Don't conflate.
Conflate.
I think I'm right about this. The concept of being the chosen people with the concept of being the better or the best people.
Right.
That's not
Good,
what it means.
good. Good.
Right.
And
That's
I
a-
think you have to, really.
What else was there?
I gotta look at him all the time.
What else was
Because
there?
being the chosen,
in terms of
there
religion?
are obligations that come
Absolutely.
with being the chosen people, and they're very, very heavy obligations.
Yes.
When you think about it, who would go through all this mishigas? I mean,
That's what
voluntarily.
Howard
You're a
said.
bubby.
That's what
You're a
Howard
bubby.
said.
My bubby, my
Your
grandpa.
Bubby would do it.
That's
Your
what my
Bubby.
great grandpa used to when I would sit on his lap and he would read to me. He'd say, "Look, it's true."
You can't picture
I
that.
yeah, right.
And a long beard, long beard, not as much as
Well, and we have discussed we have discussed the idea of God, right? And then we asked this question: who created who? Did God create us, or did we create God?
Right.
Right. So here we could use the same analogy, right?
Yeah.
Did God choose us, or did we choose God? Right, which is a very interesting way to think about this topic. But I would like to move on to the text itself, and then try to discuss some paragraphs with you that I think are very, very interesting. Okay, let's begin with the blessing here. Debbie, would you read? Go ahead.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all the nations and given us his Torah. Blessed are you, God, giver of the Torah. Because all bar mitzvah boys and among non-Orthodox Jews, bat mitzvah girls receive an aliyah, are called to bless the Torah. This blessing, which affirms the doctrine of Jewish chosenness, is widely known among Jews.
Right, and go and ask probably a very assimilated Jew. He would know the Shema Israel, and probably the next thing that he would try to say would be this blessing before or after the Torah, because he or she was taught when he or she became a bar or a bat mitzvah this blessing at least. Right, so it's very powerful to think that when we are reading from the Torah, which is our holy book, we say, thank you, God, for choosing us among all the other nations, right? And giving us your Torah. You could say that the Torah is the map, how to become the chosen people. Or now that you were chosen by God, the Torah is the map, how to make it happen in the world, right? And verses such as love your neighbor as yourself, or take care of the widow and the orphan and the stranger, and treat the slaves kindly and gently, and all the verses that you know, right, are part of that idea. If we are the chosen people, we have to respond to a higher morality, to a higher level than other nations not necessarily would respond to it. So that's the idea. Go ahead.
It's also well known among non-Jews. Thus, it was sufficient for Chaim Potok to title his 1967 bestseller "The Chosen" for people to immediately understand it was a novel about Jews. You alone have I singled out of all the families of the earth, and that is why I will visit upon you all your sins, from Amos. Anti-Semites often have claimed that because of the concept of chosenness, Jews consider themselves superior to non-Jews. In truth, chosenness has nothing in common with doctrines of racial or ethnic superiority. While racists such as the Nazis regarded Aryans as superior to all other people and thus entitled to exploit and kill their inferiors, the verse from Amos demonstrates that chosenness obligates Jews to a higher, not lower morality.
Right, so this second part of the verse, which says, that is why I will visit upon you all your sins, meaning if you do not
do the right thing,
do the right thing, I'll be there to remind you, right? And I'll be there to all the time remind you that you should respond to a higher standard, right? So I think that as you said before, I think it entails a lot of responsibility, and the question is, who would like to take that responsibility? Right? We already have a lot of tourists. And so you have tourists with your family, with your business, with your practice, with with your health, with your money. Would you like to really add more tourists to that, right? Would you like to add this notion that you have to respond to a higher moral standard? It's tough. It's tough.
Chosenness could never have evolved into a racist doctrine because Jews are not a race, and anyone can become a Jew by converting. The biblical book of Ruth describes how its protagonist, a Moabite pagan, converts to Judaism and becomes so highly esteemed she's rewarded by becoming a progenitor of King David, from whom the Messiah will descend. Imagine a Nazi, a Ku Klux Klan member, or follower of Reverend Louis Farrakhan claiming that his or her greatest leader will descend from a member of a different race.
By the way, you know that the book of Ruth was probably written as a way to counterbalance this idea of being a very close nation, a nation who would not accept others or anybody else as part of our religion. And here comes the book of Ruth, right? That some people say that was written in the time of the prophets, right? And I think that the Talmud says that Samuel wrote it. So they want to make it as ancient as the time of the prophets, to say that even back then, Jews were open to receive anybody who would accept the God of Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, and they push it even more. She is the one who is King David, no other than King David, will descend from Ruth.
And the Messiah.
And the Messiah will come, right? So go and figure that out.
Just all through the Torah, the leadership married non-Jewish. Moshe married non-Jewish.
Right, Zipporah.
Abraham have
concubines
with another.
That's okay.
Hagar, right?
Hagar and Ishmael, Adam.
Right.
And Yaakov, most of those, the leaders of the tribe, the 12 tribes, are not Jewish.
Well, it's clear that Judaism has evolved since then, right? We now know, or at least within the conservative movement, we believe that Jewishness is passed not through the father but through the mother, right? So that's a big difference with the time of the Torah. And even more, when you analyze the book of Ruth, you see that the conversion process has evolved and changed, right? So for Ruth, it was enough to say, your God is going to be my God, period. You are a Jew, we love you. Today, if a convert would come and say, your God is my God, okay, very good, but you have to go to the mikveh, you have to circumcise, and you have to you have to learn about Judaism, and you have to sit in front of the rabbis, and we will make your life miserable with questions, and right? So it has evolved,
but
and it has changed.
Ruth didn't say it to her husband; she said it to her ex-mother-in-law.
That is correct. That is
It's
correct.
a whole-
But back then the idea
Is that really
was
bad, saying something to your ex-mother?
No, it's something very
Good,
good,
good.
but it just
Oh,
showed
okay,
that
checking.
it was not
she was still her mother-in-law, not her
strong
ex-mother-in-law.
nation.
well, but the whole idea is that you would be accepted if you recognize the same God as
Yeah,
your people.
That's
Huh?
right, and that's where it should be today, by my judgment.
Well,
What?
All the torture shouldn't.
it's a long process to
I thought
convert.
you were into torture.
What do the Hasids say about this concept?
Oh, they hold it
Is
very.
this the reason?
They hold it very dear to their heart.
That's my question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they take it much more literally than
Oh,
we
yeah.
would.
Oh yeah, and you can see it here. You know, from the scriptures themselves. You alone have I singled out all of the families of the earth, meaning you are the chosen people. So it's a more literal approach than what we're going to see later is going on with the more progressive Jewish movement.
But why then did they insist? I'm talking about the Hasids, and on cutting themselves off essentially from society. That's the concept of separateness
Mm-hmm.
that they insist upon. Is that to emphasize their chosenness, or is it for some other reason?
Maybe, but there are other reasons and
Right.
elements.
Protect
You know,
themselves from
when
the
you
rest of the
isolate
world.
when you isolate yourself from others, you can build your identity stronger, and you are not getting all the influences from the outside.
Right.
So when you isolate yourself, it's easier to build your own identity, and I think that's part of what's going on with the Orthodox
Aren't you
world.
stronger if you get
Agreed.
ideas from others? I think we get
Say,
stronger.
say it again.
I think we are stronger if we get ideas from others
Yeah,
and
I
not
think
a small list of people.
Yep. Yep. Okay, let's move on a little
Okay.
bit more.
This first blessing,
Oh,
the first line, where's that blessing from?
Which one?
The first one.
From the Torah
blessing
blessing.
was chosen us from among all the nations. Where did that come from?
The blessing for the
Oh, what is the source of this blessing?
Yes.
I don't know.
Good question.
I don't know.
Okay.
So somebody just came up with a.
No. It's probably in the Talmud or in the rabbinic literature. But I don't know I don't know exactly what's the source of this
Was
blessing.
that Kyrie?
We therefore affirm not that we are better, but that we ought to be better, said Morris Joseph. Oh, I like Rabbi Kushner.
Yes,
Learn
let's
to
take a look.
drive, to swim, to throw a football, or to play the piano, not by reading a book about how to do it, but by watching people do it correctly and trying to imitate them. The Jewish people were chosen by God to be a pilot project, a demonstration community. God would give them explicit instructions about how to carry on a God-centered life. If they did it, they would bring the other peoples of the world to see how satisfying it is to live that way.
Okay, so I want to stop here for a moment, and then I want to skip a little bit because we only have 8 more minutes. So what I would like to ask you here or to share with you is that how do, according to Rabbi Kushner, and this is very powerful, how do we become a role model to others? It's not only about sitting around a nice table like this with 10, 15, or 20 people studying a text. It is about doing.
How we live.
It's how we live. And let me tell you something. You have most of you have grown-up kids. I'm, still not there. But you teach your kids not only telling them what to do, but doing it yourself. Right? The best, most effective way that someone else can learn is by seeing someone doing it. Right? So, and that's what Rabbi Kushner is telling us. God expects from us not only to read Torah and to learn the Torah and to learn all the values, but to transform them into concrete actions that we bring to our world.
But this
That's the
still-
source of the problem.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
this one is this example, this one is another example, and we have a mishmash of examples. The Jews don't agree. They always have millions.
Well, that's part of the vibrancy of the Jewish people,
Yeah.
I think.
But
Yeah,
what
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of example can we set if throughout centuries of our history we've been persecuted, thrown out of places,
Mhm.
killed, whatever? Who's paying attention to the way we act? if all they care about doing is killing us.
Well, I don't think that's all. I mean, that's
come
part
on,
of
most
it.
That's
of,
the
most
basis.
of the history throughout all
No, I
time.
disagree.
they've always
There's been plenty of communities that have been thriving, and you know, I mean,
It always,
you
it
can't
always
just.
ends badly.
But
It's
think
always
I don't think so.
period of hundreds of years the most. It's never thousands, like other nations.
I'm not saying it's not
They
part of the
collapse.
history, but I wouldn't say that that's. I wouldn't. That's not how I view
But
our
we-
history.
but
I
we-
view our
we have-
history
we
as
have
one
been-
of vibrancy and like.
but we have
thriving.
been persecuted
Of course.
and killed because we try to stick to a higher standard. And
I would say
Oh,
the
because we're
persecution
different.
comes from a misunderstanding of what this phrase means to
yes.
Jews,
Hmm.
by other people,
Hmm.
and all kinds of other things. But I wouldn't view our whole history as one of like it's all about persecution. No, it's about thriving and contributing
But
and
it's
doing
both.
just what these things say.
Yes.
Being role models.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maureen, they go side by side.
yeah. No, I'm not
The
saying it's not there.
persecution and success always work together.
Right.
And I think that there is another layer to this discussion, and it's that I was teaching at Sacred Heart the other day, and I was telling the kids that Jews have been identified as the killer of God, as deicides, right? So when you say that you killed my God, and you also think that you are the chosen one, well, I want to kill you.
That's right.
Right? So because it's very interesting to think how Jews were segregated into the ghettos. They were not allowed to go into the university or to be even outside of the walls of the ghetto and be part of the regular society, ordinary society, right? So they were not allowed to trade as other people traded. They were not allowed to work the fields as other people were allowed to do it, right? And that has to do with this idea of the Jews killing God and this idea of the Jews feeling that they are the chosen people. So when you put all of that together, it brings what Debbie was saying.
Well, I'm not saying that persecution isn't part of the history and that it is maybe unique to Jews. I'm not denying any of that. But I'm saying that to view that as the dominant piece of our past is the wrong way to look at what the Jewish people are and what we've accomplished. I mean, if you just look, there was really a sea change in the 16th century where Jews broke out of the ghettos and broke out of and became the leaders in commerce and and a resurgence.
And still got killed.
No, but it
Took
was
them a while, though.
Then you move to the 17th
not
century,
so
the 18th
wide.
century, they're part of the
Yes.
renaissance of everyone. And then, a
But
lot fell
but
away.
it was not
and-
because of the Jews only. It was because the world was changing, right?
Correct.
And the world
But
needed
Jews were
to.
part of that.
Yes.
Is my point. They weren't isolated from it. They were part of the
Even
change.
part
and,
of the leadership.
and with that change, then came a lot of assimilation. That's when you have people like Moses Mendelssohn. and
Correct.
Look at his grandchildren. Like nobody was Jewish anymore. I mean, it was like, so, I think it's so complicated. And the thing that I don't like about the Harold Kushner piece is that it still suggests that only one people has the right answer to be the light unto the world. That it's still saying, oh, it's just us. No, I think it's the wrong message. I think the message should be that every different group of people can
Okay,
bring
so I
light.
want you to leave this room with the sense that we have that right message within our Jewish tradition.
Yes, and you were saying that
And you will
before.
see it here, page 301. It says here, Jewish opposition to the doctrine of choseness, right? So you'll see that
I'm
there...
not a Kaplan person.
Yeah, I can see. So you'll see that there are a number of Jewish philosophers, modern philosophers, who would say, we cannot accept this notion of being the chosen people, because there is a little bit of truth in others as well. So let's take a look here. It's interesting.
Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionism, a small but influential fourth denomination American Jewish life, eliminated the concept of chosenness from the 1945 prayer book his movement published. Besides his belief that modern categories of thinking precluded so primitive a doctor as God's choosing of one particular nation, he justified his deletion as the best way to answer the charge that the chosen people doctrine has been a model for theories of national and racial superiority. While understandable, the second rationale strikes me as both wrong and naive. It's understandable because of a large number of Judaism's critics who link chosenness to racism. For example, shortly after the Nazis gained power, George Bernard Shaw claimed that their doctrine of Aryan racial superiority was merely an imitation of the Jewish doctrine of chosenness. As recently as 1971, Religion and Life, a liberal Methodist journal, printed the view that it's not surprising that Hitler retaliated against the chosen race by decreeing that it was not the Jewish but the Aryan race that was chosen.
Right. So this idea of chosenness, right, it has brought a number of bad things to the Jewish people, for sure.
But I dispute Kaplan because I believe in Jewish chosenness and consider him naive because I find it unlikely that the sort of people who charge the chosen people doctrine as being the model for doctrines such as Nazism would suddenly become Jew lovers if Jews would only drop this belief. People who draw such outrageous equations do not do so because chosenness offends them. Rather, Jews offend them. Were Jews to eliminate this belief, such people would seek another aspect of Judaism to attack.
Interesting. So what he's saying here is that it's not
People are going to hate us.
correct. They're gonna hate us no matter what, right?
In recent years, many Reconstructionist Jews have broken with the movement's founder over the issue of chosenness, and some have reinserted the prayers that affirm it. Their rejection of Kaplan's view is certainly as understandable as his decision to drop the doctrine. For without a sense that Jews have a special mission in the world, the case for Jewish survival and certainly for passionate Jewish commitment is greatly weakened. Finally, a bit of Yiddish irony given the painful history of the Jews. That was chosen us from among all the nations. What, O God, did you have against us?
So I disagree with Rabbi Telushkin. I think that today it is very hard to hold the idea of the chosen people. I think that it has been a source of bitterness for the Jewish people, and I understand it not as a way to brag or not as a way to say, you know what, I'm much better than you. I understand the concept of the chosen people as a huge responsibility. And as the prophet Amos says in the Tanakh, it is a source of sticking to a higher level, to a higher moral and standards in order to become a light to the nations. And God is always, asking us, and God is always there reminding us that that's what I'm expecting from the Jewish people. And if we have to contextualize that in a modern context today, a week or 2 weeks before election day.
2 weeks.
2 weeks before election days, right? So I think that we have a number of pressing topics that require from us to stick to a higher moral and higher standards as Jewish people. And I think that it's really up to us to see how are we going to confront them and how are we going to